Greetings, everyone. How is everyone today? My name is Stefan Kaplan, and I am a social media and visual strategist, and welcome to the Spin It Social Hour. The Spin It Social Hour is a labor of love born out of care and concern for my photo community, for our photo community. When this COVID crisis hit, I had to figure out a way to give back. And one of the things that I wanted to do most was support my photo community. The reason I started the Spin It Social Hour is so that you can get to know photographers around the world each week and get to know their work, learn about their journey, so that hopefully when this COVID crisis subsides and hopefully goes away, it's going to be a long road yet, folks. But I hope everyone is well, number one. But when this thing subsides and hopefully goes away a bit, I want you to know their names better. I want companies to know their names better. I want everybody out there to know them better so that they can get more work and get back on track. So this is a true labor of love born out of care and concern. So once again, Stefan Kaplan here. My brand is Spin It Social. This is the Spin It Social Hour. I am a social media and visual strategist who's worked with the Pulitzer Prizes. I've worked with AARP. I've worked with Encore.org. I teach at Princeton, excuse me, I've lectured at Princeton. I've worked there as a social media doctor, and I teach at FIT. Pardon the switch in schools. When you lecture a lot, that happens. But anyway, it is a pleasure to be here. I wanted to thank Emilio Pardo for being a sponsor of this show. He's a lifelong supporter of mine, and I so appreciate your support, Emilio. And right now, I'd like to bring on Jonathan Bronstein. Jonathan is welcome. Welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Jonathan is my production assistant that I brought on, and I really appreciate his help. One thing I've learned in doing a show like this is that it takes a lot. So I wanted to bring Jonathan on for his incredible background in writing and many other things. And I'll let Jonathan say a little something about himself. Jonathan?
I am a full-time flaneur, sometime writer, and part-time tech.
And you are a man of many hats. You are. So Jonathan, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce you to the world. It's wonderful having you on board. I'm going to get to build up now for Paula's appearance. Here we go. I'll talk to you soon, Jonathan. Thank you for driving the car. So I am now going to give you a wonderful, wonderful presentation on Paula's work. Please enjoy it. Paula's imagery brings an awareness of human vulnerability to war and poverty, political turmoil and natural disasters, from Asia to Africa to the viewer. She is the author of the critically acclaimed book, Afghanistan Between Hope and Fear. Her work has been exhibited in shows in France, Thailand, Italy, Australia, and Hong Kong, most notably her Women in War series, which traveled across the United States. Paula also contributed photographs to such Pulitzer Center projects as Ukraine's War, Lives Frozen by Conflict, Afghanistan's War Wounded, and War Widows of Afghanistan, Struggling to Survive. Paula has traveled around the world, documenting humanity and in many, many conflict zones. To have her here on the Spin It Social Hour today is truly an honor. This slideshow is a culmination of so much of her work, and it is an absolute honor to show it. Welcome, Paula Bronstein. Hello, Paula.
Hey, Stefan, thanks so much for having me. This is great what you do. It's really fantastic. And I know it's so much about what's going on now, with everything online, from yoga classes to this wonderful Spin It Social Hour. So
I tell you, it is such an honor to have you here. First thing I want to do before I forget the cardinal rule of social media, folks, if you're watching this broadcast, please hit the share button right now on Facebook. Make sure that your friends know about it by sharing it. Sharing is what amplifies it, and we want Paula's work out there. We want everybody to know more about her so that we can keep things going here for her, because she is a treasure in the photojournalism community. And like I said, I'm thrilled to have her here. So, Paula, in putting this show together, I want to thank Renee Beyer for connecting us. A shout out to Renee Beyer for doing that. What a sweetheart. What a wonderful photojournalist in and of her own right. I know you guys know each other well. So, one of the things, I'm so excited to have you here. Right now, you're normally based in Thailand, right? But now you're in Vermont, correct?
yeah, I'm currently in Vermont, right? And yeah, I'm based in Asia, Bangkok specifically.
Right.
But I don't really cover that much in Thailand, so it's always been regional. So that's why the images you've seen that go back a few decades, are from so many Asian countries.
Right. Well,
and probably, 80% of the time I'm on the road. Middle of March, I came to the United States, and I'm still here for obvious reasons until the friendly international skies open again.
Right.
Much of the travel that is happening right now, multiple countries, is one-way travel.
Right.
Meaning you can leave the country, like I left Thailand, but can't go back yet.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, and that's with a lot of countries right now.
Well, especially with this full-blown pandemic right here. So
this country, even though I'm American, I will say that being in the country that has the highest number of cases in the world is not going to, considering that obviously I'm going to want to travel as soon as I can. That's where my work is.
Right.
I don't usually work that much in the States.
Right.
So yeah, it is going to be a tough one. It's going to be a little bit more challenging coming from the country that unfortunately hasn't handled the pandemic very well.
Right, exactly. My sentiments exactly. So one of the things I wanted to do, though, is I wanted to express my sincere condolences about your dad passing away, because I know that's what you were here to see him, and then he passed away while you were here. And I just wanted to say I'm very sorry to hear that news.
Thanks. Yes, that's why I traveled here in middle of March.
Yeah. So, but I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to do this, to let everybody know about your journey. And, as I've put up here in the banners, you've worked for so many newspapers and for 15 years before moving to the Asian region and working for Getty Images as a senior staff photographer. Talk for a minute about that, please.
Which part? Well, it started out in newspaper business before moving overseas a couple of decades ago. 11 years as staff photographer. Most of my career, I was staff, not freelance. I went, full-time freelance in 2013 after 11 years of being staff with Getty Images based out of Bangkok.
Right.
And covering the Asian region and well beyond that. A good deal of it was back and forth to Afghanistan, starting in 2001 when the war on terror started, and then in 2016 that led to the publishing of my book, Afghanistan Between Hope and Fear. And that was 16 years of work going back and forth and being kind of based there for short periods of time and covering a variety of stories. So yeah, even though, being based in Asia has allowed me to really take on the world, so to speak. I mean, so many correspondents and photographers are based in different parts of the world for specific reasons. All of us now, due to COVID again, are not where we normally are and not doing the work that we normally do.
No, I know it's really been a really crazy time right now. But you've been the recipient of countless awards throughout your long career that spans 3 decades. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and it's just It's I listed a lot of them out here because I figured that it was the easiest way to do it. You've been the British Journalism Award, Photojournalist of the Year for the, I'll use my French here, the 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐧 Normandy Award for war correspondence. Do you like the way I said Bayeux?
Bayeux, yeah. Well, you have to speak it. You have to say it like the French say it.
Right, that's right. I would only do that with the French school.
This is, you know.
So the public prize, the NPPA public prize, the pictures of the year, the World Press Photo, among others.
Well, the public prize was from the 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐧, the award for war correspondence, and the public prize is quite special and something I had never received before. And the reason why it's special is the public votes for you.
That's
it's
right.
Not a bunch of judges in some closed room, you know, subjectively looking at photos and being very highly critical. It's actually the public that reacts to all of these images that deal with war and conflict, and it's from their point of view only. So they, at the time, that was 2018, and they voted my Rohingya work as the winner of the public prize. So it was quite unusual and special, because a lot of times we just want to know how does the public feel about what we're doing? How do they relate to it? You know, if we're photographing war and conflict, human rights, in this case, a refugee crisis.
Right.
So
well, and yeah, I mean, like I said, we could go on and on and on. I mean, Asia Photographer of the Year, Thailand, from the Thailand Correspondence Club, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Incredible work, Paula. You know, as we're talking here, I'm going to show your Instagram handle, your Twitter handle, your website. I want everybody to be able to find you. And, you know, one of the first questions I have, Paula, was what were you working on before COVID-19 hit? And what are you working on now? And how has this pandemic affected you in your work in any way, shape, or form?
It's affected me 100%. It'd be great if I could get unemployment in this country. You know, as I already stated, those of us that travel for a living are not.
Right.
If we are traveling, you know, where I am now in Vermont, I'll travel driving distance. I haven't flown domestically yet in the States since COVID started it. But of course my work has been affected 100%, which means my revenue has been affected 100%.
Right.
And so by the time I go back to Asia, probably it will be that I spent 4 months here, maybe longer. It all depends. We don't know. It's, you know, I know that maybe by the end of June, I might be able to fly back to Bangkok, but that is not set in stone at all. It's,
yeah.
I happen to be based in a country that really depends on tourism.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so what does that mean? That means these countries that depend on tourism or you know, are desperate to get that revenue back.
Right.
So probably the end of June, but maybe into July. So basically, what was I doing before? I was covering coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
So coronavirus in Asia, you know, unlike the United States that decided, you know, when Trump was saying, oh yeah, it'll just go away. It'll just be one of those things that will, you know, and probably he said that when, in February, and I can't remember when he said that. Yeah. But, you know, when I flew, I was covering coronavirus in 4 different countries.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I was really privileged to, you know, for Getty Images, specifically for Getty Images. Mm-hmm. And I was really happy to be able to have spent 8 days in Taipei. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I got to experience the country that has been, you know, they dealt with it like no other country. Right. They're so close to mainland China, but they just knew how to handle it. The leadership there is solid. You know, people pay attention to wearing masks. You know, it's very different from this country where people are even arguing, why should I wear a mask? So, right. So use also and politicizing this. And right. So the United States has so many more problems. The way I look at it as an expat, it was so nice to be able to go to other countries and see how is the government dealing with it? You know, so I covered it. I covered the cruise ship, the Westerham, that docked in 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐧 in the southern resort town of 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐧 in Cambodia. That was a really big story at the time, because the poor ship, you know, for 2 weeks, they weren't allowed to dock at any of the ports.
Right.
So I was able to get on board the ship, and I did coverage again. That's for Getty Images. So yeah. So, and then Yangon, I did a few days of shooting in a city where actually they weren't even paying attention to coronavirus yet. Right. They claimed there were no cases. So very interesting. My point being, very interesting to see how do different governments deal with it.
No, absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry, please.
I'll just finish up by saying, when I did fly to the United States in mid-March, considering what I had experienced in Taipei and other Asian cities, Bangkok, etc., I was shocked. Yeah. I came with a duffel bag full of PPE because I knew there was a lack of that here. Right. I prepared just like I would going into any difficult conflict situation. Which means bring it with you. Don't expect to get it when you land. Right. And that's how I had to fly in the United States. In addition to that, I arrived at New England's largest airport in Boston. No one took my temperature coming out of the gate. Now, this is middle of March. There was no thermal scan at Logan Airport in Boston. Right. And the flight arrived directly from Asia. It did not connect in any American city. This was only a one-stop flight, Bangkok to Tokyo, Tokyo to Boston. So I arrived and I was just like, what is going on here? Yeah, that was my entrance into United States and how it recognized this pandemic and so we go on to present day, and yeah, now I've been lucky that I have beautiful places to stay and go, because this is important for me while I'm here, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things, you know, you've spent many, many years and been back, how many times to Afghanistan?
Well, the first time, I entered Afghanistan early December, 2001. So it wasn't until December, because as we know, in 9/11, I was never sent to ground zero. So I never went to New York because I was based overseas. So I was in Pakistan, and then when the borders opened into southern Afghanistan, I arrived there. But that wasn't until early December when it was safe to go in, relatively safe. And then going back and forth. Right. Not living there for long periods of time, but back and forth for 3 weeks and sometimes 6 weeks at a time, depending on what was going on. You know, there were many years, if we go back to 2009 and, the many elections. I've covered all of the elections, including last year. I was there last year for the presidential election in September, end of September. So yeah, I mean, gosh, I have a tremendous amount of experience in the country. Yeah. So it's good to keep on going back.
Talk about your work. Talk about, for instance, I know you've done extensive work in Afghanistan. As I show some of these photos here, talk about your work and tell us about your journey in Afghanistan and some of the things that you've encountered, and how you prepared for things while you were there, and all this incredible work that came out of this, and you created a book with.
Okay, I would say keep on going. You're now going through the book. Yeah, because I just wanted to keep on showing a variety of photos there. That way people can understand. Sure. And people that haven't seen the book, they can understand what's in the book.
This photo here really struck me because, I mean, talk about this for a second.
Well, I mean, I'm covering not just war and conflict. I'm covering insecurity, and when a country is at war, that means there's always going to be very high unemployment. Why? Because there's insecurity, everywhere. This picture speaks about hunger, the impoverished people, and this woman, you know, is one of the many female beggars you see on the streets. Many of them wearing burqas, because she's a Zara. For her, it's more customary to wear, you know, kind of a more comfortable, you know, she's more or less shrouded in her scarf, but she's not wearing a burqa, but she is sitting in front of that bread store for a reason. She's going to wait to get the scraps of bread before they close.
Right.
I covered a lot of health issues. So again, when we're talking about covering a country that is at war, there's a whole rainbow of issues that need to be, you know, we're looking at the handicap.
Right.
Why? Because this is a country that has so many handicap.
Right.
Not from the most recent extended war that's been going on 18 years, from decades of war.
Right.
And not only decades of war, what happens when there's war in many of the countries? Landmines that never, you know, they farmers will find them, you know, even in Cambodia when it's rainy season, it'll rise to the surface, and so children and adults are still getting maimed decades later because of landmines.
Yeah, I mean, we forget.
Many of the handicap that I photographed in Afghanistan, it wasn't just that they lost a limb or, you know, being caught in crossfire between the Taliban and military. It's landmines.
Right. No, I mean, we forget how long this war has gone on for, and all of this conflict, and it's just devastating. But, you know, the thing, you know, one of the things that you have to do when you're in these regions, of course, is navigate everything around you. And I was wondering, you know, so let me get to the question here specifically. What's a day in the life like for Paula Bronstein on assignment? What do you do to prepare, and what do you do when things don't necessarily turn out the way you plan? For instance, because I know that, you know, you photographed many villages in Afghanistan, and sometimes things may develop and things may not. Why don't you talk about your experiences with that?
Well, I think it's not just Afghanistan. I mean,
right.
It's anywhere you go.
Right.
You have to try to prepare as much as possible. Things rarely go as planned, especially in countries that are bureaucratic, that have serious corruption. It just means things will take longer. If you're trying to get permission, you know, I don't care whether it's Ukraine or Afghanistan. It's just some countries that are so difficult to kind of jump over. You know, make sure that when you arrive where you need to be, that you're not wasting days upon days waiting to get permission. In Afghanistan, we're talking about access to photograph women. We're talking about access to get into homes, especially in many of the stories I did that dealt with women. You know, gaining access to the widows. When I did a project on widows there, meant getting permission from the brother-in-law. She didn't have a husband anymore. That's why she's a widow. So, but the male head of household. So without permission from the male head of household, it's pretty much a no-go.
Right.
And even when she would, you know, we would sit and have tea and talk, and, you know, she was thrilled to have someone that cared, that someone that wanted to focus on her story. Even with her acceptance, it was not a guarantee.
Right. Right.
So many of these, you know, not just Afghanistan, but in conservative Islamic cultures, you have to respect the fact that, unfortunately, it may take longer to gain access, or you just may have the door slammed in your face. It's just part of what can happen. It doesn't.
And that's the thing. It can go from one day to another in terms of your access, in terms of your ability to maneuver around all these things. It's always a roll of the dice that way in terms of what you're going to be able to capture. But whatever you do, whenever you do it, you capture it just with the most incredible eye and care and professionalism. It's your work over the years just has always boggled my mind. I mean, it's just incredible. So, you know, as I'm going through some of these, this one, of course, you know, struck me because, you know, life goes on, as we know, in many places, despite the conflict. And people forget that. Talk about that a little, Paula. I mean, people always are entrenched in the war and everything that's going on, but life goes on for these people, you know?
Well, that's the whole point.
Right.
You have to be able to show daily life.
That's right.
It doesn't matter whether you're doing it in Gaza. It doesn't matter, you know, because when there's countries that are still at war after so many years.
Right.
You know, and I'm working for a newswire. What does that mean? That means that I need to be enough of a self-starter, you know, to say, hey, I'm going to go do a story on bodybuilding today, or I'm going to do a story on, dealing with education, healthcare, other issues that are there. They're all those stories are there, and they're all important stories.
Right.
You know, and obviously poverty. You know, you saw the women begging on the street. So yeah. Now we're moving on to Ukraine.
Yeah, I wanted to, you know, switch through because, you know, we want to get through a lot of material that you have here, and we want to make sure we talk about a lot of this. Talk a little about working in the Ukraine on this.
Well, this was a really difficult. I mean, so first of all, again, we're dealing with a war that started in 2014, so it's in the 6th year, and I focus specifically on the elderly there because this country has the largest population of elderly affected by war in the world. So, you know, with the help of you know, a great fixer, I was able to get access to crossing borders from East Ukraine to Donetsk or to Lugansk. You know, these are areas that's extremely difficult, very bureaucratic. When I spoke about that already, you know, gaining access, getting permissions to where a lot of these elderly lived. They lived on the front line.
Right.
They lived, you know, before this war started, they lived in beautiful neighborhoods close to the city of Donetsk, you know, with, you know, huge gardens in the summer. And they lived a relatively, you know, really nice life surrounded by family and friends. Once the war started in 2014, the youth left and the elderly stayed behind. And so then things deteriorated from there.
Right.
Now you have 6 years later, you know, it's serious problems with the elderly having no access to proper health care.
Right.
They're food insecure. They're, you know, it's problem after problem. And this woman that we're looking at, this photo, she passed away last year. So many of the not many, but a good deal of the subjects I photographed passed away.
Oh, what a shame.
She died in a fire. I just wanted to mention she died in a fire in her home.
This photo, just I've looked at it in preparing for this show today countless times because it's so endearing. It's such a sweet photo, such a beautiful portrait of this woman, and God bless her. I'm sorry to hear that. You captured it just magnificently. She's what a face, what a beautiful face. I just want to talk to her looking at this photo, you know.
She's at the time I took that picture. Well, first of all, she died in a fire in her home because her village was so close to the military zone. It meant the firefighters couldn't get there on time. The reason why the fire happened is that she was using lanterns. Either candles or lanterns, because the electricity had been cut off to that village. Since her death, I think the ICRC, the UNHCR has helped to finally bring electricity to that village.
Right.
If that village had electricity, she wouldn't be
dead. Right.
Still be alive because her home would not have caught on fire.
Hey, let's step back for 1 second, because I want to make sure there's some live comments coming here that we address just a few of them because it's important. Frank Gallagher, who's a photographer who I know, has asked before, stepping back to Afghanistan for 1 second, has it gotten any easier since 2001 as a woman photographer to work in a place like Afghanistan? Has the influx of Westerners changed attitudes there towards a foreign working woman, Paula? Frank asks.
I'd say not a lot changes. They're certainly used to it, but you know, you got to realize that nowadays, I mean, a good deal of the NGOs have had their budgets cut. There's probably less foreigners that are living there full time than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
A war that's been going on, you know, 18 years, and doesn't matter what we hear in the news about the so-called peace talks, about the 8 weeks of conversation with the Taliban in some 5-star hotel in Qatar. Okay, where are we back to today? You know, it's not getting any coverage because nothing else besides coronavirus is getting coverage.
Right.
But we're still at war there. And
Right.
and in fact, some of the attacks that have happened, Taliban has not claimed. You know, the one that happened in the maternity hospital recently,
Right.
Taliban did not take responsibility for that attack. So we're just, there's, you know, my book, the title of it, you know, Afghanistan Between Hope and Fear. I tell you, I never imagined 4 years later after the book coming out that the title of the book would be so much true about today's Afghanistan. So many things have changed for women, but not a lot.
Well, I thank you for taking Frank's question and answering it. So now we're going to jump back to Ukraine here and go through some of the work here that you've done. And I mean, you can talk about some of this as I'm scrolling through and inform everybody about, you know, the subject matter here and how you dealt with, you know, documenting this over the period.
Well, as I said, the decision to focus strictly on the elderly is they are the population that was left behind. When we talk about war and conflict, whether it's Yemen, so much of the time you hear about children, you hear about malnutrition, you hear about poverty, you know, all the other issues that are part of war and conflict. In this case, as I stated, it was the elderly that were left behind. So it's important to show this, and I felt like it was more of a, you know, a story that was just not really being covered.
Right. No.
And, you know, it's good to come up with these underreported issues.
Right.
Especially, I think these days with war and conflict, because I think the public, there's a little bit of, you know, especially with Afghanistan, you know, when wars go on too long.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Yeah. And gosh, I mean, Gaza is the perfect example. Mm-hmm. You know, when the change is so small and both sides, you know, it just seems like nothing's ever going to solve the real issues and bring peace.
Right.
So I think the only thing that's created a bit more peace in these war-torn countries is this coronavirus and how that has affected some of these conflict zones. You're barely hearing about Yemen. Barely, you know what I'm saying? It's
yeah, I mean, it becomes back page news so quickly these days, you know, and that's something that's always the most difficult thing. Just like there are so many issues these days that are taking place everywhere that are taking a back seat and not being reported on as much because the coronavirus is just overwhelming everything news-wise. I mean,
right. And it should be, but I mean,
it should be, and it should be. But the point is that there's a lot of issues that are not being paid attention to as much by the news, and that in turn is going to set a lot of things back for a long time. You know, but we know.
I think I believe there's so much going on in the background. It's just not getting. It's
right.
You know, I just recently heard the story of, you know, it is spring in Afghanistan, and what does that mean? Poppies. So the story came up. I think it was probably on NPR. I heard it on, and it was basically, again, how what's been going on with the drug trade, that, and how that's been changing a bit with coronavirus taking all the attention.
Right.
And
yeah, I mean, it's
and
going.
borders closing. So, with the drug trade, of course, they'd have to take it across those borders in a different way. How are they doing that?
Right.
So I know we're showing some Rohingya pictures.
Yeah, I wanted to get to the Rohingya because I mean it's such an important thing to show and to talk about. So as I scroll through these, why don't you tell our viewers about the work that you did with the Rohingya and that part of the world?
Right. So in 2017, I think everybody knows what happened in 2017 when this refugee crisis of enormous proportions really took hold. I was in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, close to the Myanmar border, where the flow of Rohingya refugees was coming from, and it was just unprecedented. It was the fastest growing refugee camp in the world at the time. So, and they were arriving, on boats in the middle of the night, as you can see.
Mm-hmm.
The only light, there was no light. The only light was, my translator and assistant was holding an LED panel for me. So, and it wasn't just me. It was people trying to figure out how were they going to photograph in complete darkness as they came in.
Right.
All the night. But a lot of these photos are showing the difficulties for the Rohingya, who are walking barefoot for weeks at a time. Some of them, the elderly, pregnant women, and they're survivors. What they endured is unthinkable. Really is unthinkable. And today, bringing it to today, with coronavirus, there's only a few cases, and thankfully, in the refugee camp that still has well over 700,000 Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar, they're able to contain the few cases that they've had, and MSF has 15, 16 different medical facilities. So what they do have in these camps is assistance with medical care that will, there won't be a coronavirus. There may be other issues. This time of year, we're going to go into the rainy season soon there. They have to contend with that. So there's always other issues for the Rohingya besides the current one, the global pandemic. And thankfully, I haven't heard any stories of there being too many cases there now.
Right.
But long term, this situation is complete stalemate. There's no talk of repatriation back to Myanmar because the government there and Aung San Suu Kyi is doing nothing to really assist these refugees, giving them what they want in the security they're asking for in order to even think about going back. So
well,
no end to this story, no end in sight for quite a while, unfortunately.
Well, we're thankful that we have photojournalists such as yourselves and reporters that are always out there to document these things, because we can't let these stories just disappear. One of the real things that I wanted to do with this show also is go through your journey, go through your work that way. And the next stop that I wanted to make here was I wanted to go to the area. You've documented a lot of things around the world. You were in Nepal when the earthquake happened. So was a very dear friend of mine. I don't know if you've ever met her or run into her, Donatella Lorch.
No, but that's right. No, I haven't. Sorry.
Donnie, it's okay. Donnie did a lot of work for NPR. She was there when the quake happened with her son, Lucas, and her family. Luckily, everything turned out okay for them. She's not there anymore, but she did tremendous work. And I'm going through your work here. Tell us about that, being there after the quake.
Well, I'm going to preface, I just wanted to say one thing, being based in Asia. I've covered about 11 or 12 earthquakes. Not just earthquake. Let's be clear.
Wow.
So in terms of natural disasters, if you look at where most of them happen, we're talking about extreme weather. You know, we're talking about the tsunami, going back to the tsunami in 2004, which, if for the Nepal earthquake, it was the biggest one they had in over 100 years. So what happens when you go into an earthquake or you go into this unbelievable disaster that's happened? And in Nepal, we're dealing with mountain communities. The same thing in Pakistan. You showed some of my photos that were from the earthquake in Kashmir. You showed a photo of a man getting his hair cut amongst the rubble and people praying amongst the rubble. That was the Pakistan earthquake.
That was the Pakistan earthquake.
Yeah, that was the Pakistan earthquake, and it hit so many of these mountainous villages in Kashmir, closer to the Indian border with Kashmir. These are remote communities. What does that mean? It's harder to get the aid in. It's harder to, get what I mean. We had to go in with the military. We had to fly in by helicopter to a lot of these communities. They're too remote, right. and roads were destroyed, bridges were destroyed. So there's so many issues that happen when something like this. It's immediate. There's no warning.
Right.
All of a sudden, you're stopping whatever you're doing, whatever else you're covering,
right.
And trying to figure out how am I going to get to this location as quickly as possible. Usually, the airports are shut down for at least a day or so, depending on obviously how the airport has fared the earthquake. Runways and such.
Sure.
And so for the media, it becomes a race against time to get there, coverage, and to go in prepared. Again.
Oh, absolutely.
It's no different from me bringing a duffel bag of PPE to the United States, which is kind of a joke that I had to do it. But
no, I remember when Donnie was there. I remember when Donatella was there. I helped her with some of the communications and stuff because, I mean, her and her son at certain points was sleeping under a tarp in the pouring rain.
And so the media are jet setting into situations.
Right.
And again, this is not just flying into Kathmandu. I was in Afghanistan at the time.
That's right.
So I was in Afghanistan covering stories, and then I had to figure out how was I getting Kathmandu from Kabul.
Wow.
So what that meant is getting a flight from Kathmandu to Delhi, which is just a couple of hour flight, and then trying to get on the next possible flight I could from Delhi to Kathmandu.
Wow.
So I was not that far away.
Right.
And so basically this is, covering these situations can be incredibly challenging, physically, mentally, again, trying to make sure that you have food and water, electricity, you have to have a way of transmitting. You can't, that's always paramount, especially if you're working for a newswire. That's so where are you going to stay? How are you going to transmit? If you can't transmit, you have to bring in a sat phone. If all the lines are down, then it's sat. So there's always going to be that plan B, and it's certainly not just for still photographers. It's for all media.
Right.
So now you're looking at, this was 2013, Tacloban. This was just horrific. This was absolutely an island in the Philippines. And the Philippines, as many of you may or may not know, has always been, they've just had so many natural disasters. It's just where the country is, and this was the worst amongst the worst they ever had, because not enough people fled. Not enough people took the warnings that this was going to be really, really, huge tidal waves that were going to kill so many. So not enough people left for safer zones, and too many were close to the ocean, and tens of thousands died. This was just a horrific. I mean, as you can see, some of these images are hard to look at, but no. And then, of course, the tsunami in Japan.
Right.
Now we're in a first world country, a country that, this was so interesting to cover something like this
Right.
in a country like Japan, where everything works normally all the time, you know, where people are actually quite private. They're not used to, you know, the media descending in on them and covering this, you know, one of the worst natural disasters they ever had.
Right.
In their history. And the death was unbelievable. So, and in addition to that, we have to talk about something that was important with this particular story,
Yeah.
and how we had in Sendai we had a nuclear power plant that had been damaged.
That's right.
So Japan had this zone, this nuclear zone. It was obviously, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but you couldn't get too close to that zone when you're doing the coverage. Many of the media, and especially I know Reuters was able to get, they were able to at least get things brought in so that they could measure and
Right.
know if they were getting affected by the radiation. So sometimes you can't believe what you're dealing with. Here's this, you know, and especially for the people, they're dealing with two massive problems.
Two massive things back to back. You know, Scott Matthewson here asks, what do you see for the future of conflict photography with COVID, masks, distancing, travel restrictions, etc.? Your photos would look so different if the subjects were all wearing masks. That's an interesting question.
Well, it's an interesting question considering we're looking at Japan.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but
No. I want Scott to be looking at these pictures. If you go back through these pictures, you're going to see how many people are wearing masks.
Right.
People in Japan wear masks.
Right. That's right. Here's one right here.
Almost every photo you see,
right,
he's wearing a mask. The military is wearing a mask. This culture always wears masks, and the Asian cultures always wear masks. To them, seeing what's going on in this country, in a culture that's not used to wearing masks, hey, you know, I would say every single photograph I took of that disaster, somebody was wearing a mask.
Yeah, no, it definitely is something here that boggles my mind. Yeah, they're high. Yeah, they're this. Yeah, they're that. But you know what? We need to wear the masks. We need to take care of each other that way. And in Asia, and like you said, in many countries, they've been wearing masks daily for ages, you know?
It has nothing to do with the pandemic. It's cultural.
Right, it's cultural.
Especially in Japan.
Right.
Especially in Japan. So, but it was just funny. This question came up right when we were looking at.
Right. No, well, perfect timing, you know, in terms of, that's why, you know, viewers who are watching are paying attention to your work. And one of the things I want to do, I want to switch gears here, and I want to go to something that really touched me when I was, like, they all touched me, but the fact that you used black and white to document this Indonesia's mental health situation over there. I'm going to go through some of these photos, and why don't you tell us a little about this work, Paula?
This was a story I did quite a while ago on the mental health situation in Indonesia. All of these photos were taken in Bali, and they weren't shot in black and white. Just to be clear, all photographers know that, you know, that they make that choice, they make that decision. Sometimes after the fact, whether the work is more powerful in black and white than color. For this subject matter, I felt it was more important to stick to black and white. I focused on, you know, there's been a lot of attention to the mental health situation in Indonesia. It has gotten better since I did this story, but I did the work in Bali because here I was, you know, an hour away from where I was taking these pictures, staying near the beach in a perfectly wonderful hotel where surfers are catching waves and stuff. And these poor people, once you go into the interior of this extremely touristy island, you know, unveils a lot of, you know, some human rights, in this case, how they deal with the mental health. I mean, the mentally ill, the problem in Indonesia as I say, that has had improvements over the years,
Mhm.
was really how much money goes into the mental health sector. Are these people who may have a number of issues, are they getting proper care, proper medicine? The reason why they were being chained and treated like dogs is because the family members felt, well, if we don't do this, they'll just wander away, they'll bother other people. This is a way of protecting us and protecting them.
Mm.
So this obviously wasn't a one-off case. This was happening
Right.
to many of the mentally handicapped people, and a good deal of them were not getting proper medication. And in addition to that, the mental hospitals were in disarray and in bad condition.
Right.
And this all comes back to the government. You know, how much money are they really? How much of a focus are they really putting on the mental health and the mentally handicapped? So
how did you get I mean, how did the access work with this? I mean, how did you go?
I saw this story, to be quite honest, I saw this story had been done by local television, and I just saw it in one of the local publications. I grabbed the story and said, wow, Bali? Really? You know, I knew, and I heard about the story extensively on Java. I knew this had been going on for years on Java, but it was this idea that it was all happening in the interior of Bali. You know, like I said, one of the top tourist destinations in the world,
Right.
and one of the most beautiful islands. So it's doing this story there that I thought was very compelling and very unusual.
Paula, let me ask you, what going through these photos, since they're so powerful, as all your work is, what's one of the most memorable and impactful moments for you as a photographer that always stays with you throughout your work so far? Is there one?
Well, I mean, you've already brought up you're going through a real nice
Of course.
variety of work here, and I think any of the viewers can see that I'm not just covering breaking news.
Of course.
I'm covering daily life. I'm covering human rights issues, humanitarian issues,
Mhm.
and obviously, as a female photojournalist, covering a lot of issues that deal with women.
Right. And you've also covered female Marines in Afghanistan. Tell us about that while I go through some of these incredible photos that you took of the female Marines there.
Well, at the time, an editor asked me, you know, this was in the news at the time, that U.S. military was going to be elevating the role that women were taking in the Marines and taking through more frontline training, and so this was really a news story. It was a news story, but it was best to embed with the female Marines, and I spent like 4 or 5 days with them.
Mm.
You know, obviously embedding with them meant that I was following them around day in, day out,
Right.
and able to document what they were doing. So yeah, this story started from basically a news story, and then this is just how I've covered it. You know, I mean, for me, it was fun. It was, you know, embedding with the U.S. military. There were some things I hated about it, actually.
Right.
You're inside their bubble.
Yeah,
you don't get to do anything unless you are embedded, and you have to understand that you do it their way. You don't do it your way.
Right. Well, you know, this touched me because my mother was one of the first New York City police officers back in 1973 to actually patrol with the men. So I've been around strong women who have done amazing work out there and been trailblazers and everything else. And these female Marines are nothing but that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great story to cover at the time.
Right.
At the time, you know, it like any story, you know, you have to make it intimate. Your access is everything.
Right.
You know, showing the high moments, the low moments, you know, that, you know, woman to woman, it's always great to do these kinds of stories, to be honest.
No, that's right. And we're thankful that you do. So, you know, we're going to come to a close soon, but a couple of the other questions I wanted to quickly ask you was you've covered so much around the world. Is there any subject matter that you shy away from by any chance?
That's a good question. That's an excellent question. I think we can go straight back to COVID because it's not that I would shy away from covering, you know, COVID such that, you know, I'm going into more of a more, you know, going into hospitals, going with first responders, whatever. I need to be prepared. So the subjects I shy away from are mostly if I don't feel I'm properly prepared, because I don't do anything unless I am. Mm-hmm. And especially now with COVID in this country where there's so many cases, there's stories I want to do. I actually need to order more PPE from overseas. Yeah. But I don't really shy away from stories. No,
I didn't think.
No, I think though that there are. I go back to COVID because I think like Ebola, there are stories that a lot of us don't. You know, we want to be protected. I know how to protect myself when we're in COVID.
Oh yes, you do.
I'm very cautious. No, but I'm very cautious. Look at even the most experienced photojournalists I know. You know, some of them are not with us anymore, and it doesn't mean they made the wrong decision. It's just you try to be as careful as possible. It's just now we're into this situation with coronavirus where there's still so many questions about, you know, especially for people that live in New York City or the cities that really have been hardest hit. You know, just the transmission of this virus. There's so many things doctors do not know in the medical.
They really don't. They really don't.
So again, we get back to, yes, you know, it's not that I shy away. Whatever I do, if I'm prepared and I have full understanding of how what is the best way of covering it, I'll do it in a second.
I'm glad it was a good question, though. So that makes
it's a good question to relate back to present day.
Exactly. So, you know, I have to ask this question, right, Paula? I mean, we've gone through so much of your work here. Who are some of the photographers that have inspired you over the years? Just a couple.
We have like 3 minutes left. You're gonna ask the question now?
Okay, no problem. If you know, it's fine.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's just that I just
we can go just a few minutes over. We can go just a few minutes over.
I mean, are there any other questions that have come in?
From the comments section, we had a lot of comments about your photography, that your amazing imagery from Therese Brown. Jerry says powerful photography, so all of the viewers realize the work that you've done. Renee Edelman, who's a friend, chimed in. So there were quite a few comments there. But one of the other questions I had was
let's go back to Edward's question before we.
Let's go back to.
Let's get to some of the questions before we wrap up. Edward
wrote a really long question here, so let's try to read most of it. Do the majority of your subjects tell you they want the outside world to see their plight in the hope of the outside world will in some way help their situations improve? This was something I encountered when I was in the Gaza Strip. The people there really wanted their situation documented and shown with the hope that images could convey their reality to the outside world. Most importantly, as a photographer, how do you feel you have contributed to awareness and have had an effect on improving, I would think, lives and conditions?
Okay, yeah, that's a lengthy question.
It is.
A number of questions all in one, but the main point of it is trying to, obviously, especially with Gaza, a story that I could barely get any interest in publications wanting to run the story because everybody is so sick of the same war and conflict. Right. But the Gaza people need help, and you've got to, when you go in there, still try to get those photos out to the world and tell a different story within that conflict situation, something that's going to get attention and something that people say, oh my God, I didn't know this or that, even, Well, that's the thing. I always try to go in to situations like this. They're letting me into their homes. They're letting me document their lives.
That's right. That's right.
What can I do for them in return? you know, it's important to always think about that, you know.
Oh, it is.
You know, it will always be important, no matter what the situation is, but especially with the vulnerable, with people that are caught in war and conflict, people in Gaza who are living in an open air prison. I mean, they can't leave, and so they, you know, at least what's happened over the years there, and with so many, with this conflict dragging on is the media there are incredibly sophisticated, very talented, and they have been getting images out. And I think that's happened in Afghanistan as well. So it's not just us, the foreigners, that have to jump into these situations, who may not speak Arabic, who may not, you know what I mean? It's the locals are doing, you know, especially in Gaza, they're doing such incredible work there.
Right.
And it's just interesting that he brought it up, because he's obviously been there.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah. And we have photographers chiming in from around the world. Carlos Villalon, who's a friend of mine who has documented many things in Colombia and other places, has wonderful photographs. Thank you both. Carlos has been published in Nat Geo many times. And, you know, so one of the things I want to get to as we come to a close, because it is a discussion about photography and social media, after all the years of me being a photo editor at the New York Times and being in the business, and now social media, it's social media that brought us together through Renee Beyer. And I thank her for that. And I thank social media for that. I'm going to ask one of the closing questions here. How do you feel that social media, has it helped your career? I mean, you have an Instagram feed that everybody should follow, a PBB photo. You get to see a wonderful side of you in that feed as well. So I want people to explore that and get to know you more, because, you know, I want people to know about you and your work.
Well, I mean, I use social media all the time. It's
Right.
You know, a lot of us, I think, become more angered with the fact that we find out with Instagram that people can just grab photos as they wish. There's negative and positive sides to it. Let's be honest.
One quick.
And I think some photographers have taken their accounts private on Instagram.
Right.
I don't know how it's all going to pan out, because that's been recent. But
That's right.
how do I use it? You know, now I've been fairly quiet with Instagram, because I haven't been shooting a lot since I came to the United States.
That's right.
For obvious reasons. I haven't been traveling like I normally do. And but I do share some of my travel imagery on.
You do, and you know what?
It's fun. It's fun for me.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to post the latest, you know, news story I've covered, or, you know, some photographers I think are very, I only want to post my professional work there.
Right.
That's fine, but to me, let's have fun with it. You know, if I'm here in Vermont, I may post some pictures from that. You know, it's where I am and what I'm doing.
I love the photos. I love the photos of you in the snow.
It's in New England. It's May. It's craziness.
Yeah. I love the photos that, you know, that show many things during your travels. I want to find a couple here real quick. Here's some of the.
If you go to the hug right there. Go up.
Which one?
Right there.
Yeah.
Well, these are the images I shot when I left Bangkok. You see if you can bring that up, because this is just incredible. This was when I was checking in from my flight to come to the United States in mid-March.
Wow.
Yeah, these are Chinese travelers going back home. This is Taipei. This is how they were dealing with it. You know, no mask for the dog, but that didn't. You know, at a Chinese temple in Taipei, women praying at a Chinese temple with her baby. The next picture, I think, this is in the metro again. Everybody wearing masks.
Everybody, you know, I know.
The idea that, you know, the rest of the world is looking at America thinking, why are they debating this? What's wrong with these people? You know, they just can't even believe there's a debate about it. To them, it's just second nature.
And you know what, Paula? I'm glad you take breaks too, because here you are at the laptop editing and having a glass of wine or something, and you just.
I'm on a plane. That's big.
Oh, that's a plane. I haven't been on a plane that fancy.
Well, all you have to do is be a frequent flyer on Emirates, gold or silver, and they upgrade me. I don't pay for these tickets; they upgrade me.
Wow!
And because they have some of the finest, they have A380s.
Right.
This is what business class looks like.
Wow.
On the A380, okay?
If anybody deserves it,
you didn't know I was on a plane. You didn't.
Anybody deserves it, it's you. So I'm glad that you get to enjoy that some. And I'm going to say, in closing here, Paula, I want to show a closing slideshow that I put together for you, and I'm going to put it up here. So hold on one second.
Okay.
I wanted to show it. So we're not going to be visible for a second, but let the viewers enjoy this slideshow for a minute.
Sure.
Of a lot of your work. Let me go back up to. Now, I wanted to end with another selection of photos that showed a lot of your travel, that showed on some beautiful moments and some incredible color and other things that you've captured, the joy of life in many of these places. Even though we've heard about all the conflict and we know of it, people's lives go on. And I wanted to end with that right there, with that beautiful smile from that beautiful girl. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. I'm going to bring you on full screen. And I want to let everybody know that this interview with Paula Bronstein has been absolutely incredible. I'm so thankful for you being here. You've shared so much of your work and travels and insight with us. I want everybody to check out your website, which is www.paulaphoto.com. Check her website out, get to know her more, find her on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, it's PBB Photo. And on Twitter, it's Paula Photo. See that? I have them all memorized already.
Okay.
And, it's just
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure having you here. And one of the things I want to do every week is I show a photo of the week. And I wanted to go to one photo in particular here that I'm going to bring on full screen for a minute. And then I'm going to bring us back. You'll see it, and the viewers will see it. It's right here. And I'm going to. Of the geese flying by there.
I lost you. I didn't hear what you said for the last 3 minutes.
I'm so sorry. I forgot about that, Paul. I was saying that Gary's photo he's an amazing photographer, Gary Hirshhorn. And he usually calls the geese that are flying by, things like that, a lot from Hoboken and other places, as the Canadian Royal Air Force. So anyway, it's been a pleasure, Paula. Thank you so much. I want you to take care of yourself. I'll stay in touch, and I'm going to get to a couple of things that I have to wrap with, but be well and be safe, okay?
And thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's been an honor. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, everybody. Hey, 8 minutes over, but for Paula, it's worth it. And such an honor to have her on. I hope you enjoyed learning a lot about her journey and her travels. Once again, this has been the Spin It Social Hour with me, Stefan Kaplan. And I'm so glad that this Spin It Social Hour is having an impact and that the photographers are able to get their work out there. So thank you for being here. And I want to mention a few things. So actually, I want to bring this up because my colleague, 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐧 Srinivasan, who's one of my dearest friends and colleagues, is holding an incredible Muckrack Academy in conjunction with Muckrack, the fundamentals of social media for journalists, PR pros, and everyone. So save your seat, get social media certified with 𝐒𝐩𝐲 Srinivasan, my dear colleague who I cover many things with. We've covered the Pulitzers together. We've worked on many projects together with Princeton University and other things, Social Media Weekend. And Ronaldo's chiming in now. So check Sri out. Register at mrac.co/social. Reserve your spot now for free. Free, folks. Get certified for the fundamentals of social media. And Ronaldo's chiming in. So I am going to bring up right now Ronaldo, who is going to be next week's. Sorry, I'm having 2 shows this week. So because Paula was here, I wanted to grab her and get her online. But Ronaldo is the gentleman who put the first camera in my hands when we used to roller skate together. And I can't thank him enough. I'm looking forward to having my buddy on Thursday, RMR Pictures. This Thursday, May 28th at 11 a.m. Join us. Ronaldo is a phenomenal photographer. He's taken some amazing pictures over the years. And I can't wait for you to learn more about him and his work. So that will be that. So Thursday, please tune in. Join up for Sri's Muck Rack session. And I wanted to say 10 minutes over, but we're getting better, to the Spin It Social Hour. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here, for learning about the photographers. Follow me on Spin It Social, at Spin It Social, across the board, everywhere. And I look forward to having Ronaldo on Thursday. Folks, thank you for your time. And please share this broadcast as we wrap up and I lose my voice. Thank you very much, folks. You take care now. Bye-bye.